Today we'll examine major affirmative warrants of the January and February Lincoln-Douglas topic. Resolved: the United States ought not provide military aid to authoritarian regimes. But before we jump into the warrants, make sure you understand their importance. If you are unsure of how to use warrants to strengthen your arguments, check out our video, What is a Warrant? In that video, you'll learn how warrants build bridges between your claims and evidence, helping you win more rounds. As always, the link to the full transcript and source notes is in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first warrant the affirmative must deal with is the definition of military aid. Not to overgeneralize, but a broader definition will in most cases help the negatives attempt to justify the aid process. The affirmative has the upper hand in being able to establish a framework first, though. Utilize this advantage by providing a narrow interpretation of military aid. For an example, see our resolution breakdown video for the topic. Link is in the corner, or check out the description. Building on a tighter definition of military aid, the affirmative should show the negatives of building other countries' militaries. This next warrant is a domestic consequence. In 2016, Max Bariak and Lazaro Gamio of the Washington Post wrote after an extensive investigation into foreign aid and its uses concluded, U.S. foreign military financing is essentially a way of subsidizing its domestic defense industry. The affirmative should argue that military aid outside of active combat zones is mainly just the U.S. government providing cheap loans to anyone wanting to buy from U.S. manufacturers. In essence, it is a means of rewarding an already powerful lobbying group within the U.S. The third warrant deals with an argument the negative will be inclined to pursue. The affirmative will need to show that authoritarian regimes are not stabilizing in the long term. There is evidence to show that these regimes, especially military ones, can lead to stable governments and new constitutions. However, the chances of this happening are slim. Gabriel Negrado found in an exhaustive 2013 study of authoritarian-produced constitutions that the results are short-term, with reforms not lasting past the tenure of the dictator regardless of the constitutional advances. With no long-term reform, authoritarian rule rarely turns into democratic rule. Our fourth warrant deals with effectiveness. While there might be a case made that aid is useful in molding authoritarian regimes to U.S. interests, the way the U.S. has emplaced its aid policy shows historically this has not worked. Mara Karlin of the Brookings Institute wrote at the end of 2017, "The biggest problem with Washington's efforts to build foreign militaries is its reluctance to weigh in on higher-order questions of mission, organizational structure, and personnel. Issues that profoundly affect the military's capacity but are often considered too sensitive to touch. Instead, both parties tend to focus exclusively on training and equipment, thus undercutting the effectiveness of U.S. assistance." The strength of this warrant is that it deals with the practical solvency of foreign policy concerns instead of relying on a strictly value-based argument against aid. The value-based approach is certainly the best for the affirmative. However, they need to be ready to counter the neg's concern with solvency. The United States has long been considered a bastion of democratic values. However, recent political dialogue seems to have damaged this perception. In reality, an objective view of American foreign policy going back to Washington quickly reveals U.S. policy as completely self-interested. Therefore, the affirmative want to avoid or reject pragmatist values and criterions. To enforce this warrant, cases need to emphasize the collective support of democratic principles and mechanisms, even in the face of undemocratic policies. The argument needs to shift from a normative valuation of military aid as a policy and instead argue its incongruence with general will and national identity. Allow the negative to argue the effectiveness of aid in their own case. This is an easily refuted position that the AF shouldn't waste time on in their constructive. Today we've discussed 5 affirmative warrants for the new Lincoln-Douglas topic. Resolved: the United States ought not provide military aid to authoritarian regimes. Being able to identify and address the warrants in a round enables the debater to better connect with the judge. Ultimately, it is about winning more rounds. While we have provided a starting point, the work is only beginning. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of what we have to offer at Real Critique, check out our website. There you'll find everything from LD theory to criterion analysis. Also, follow us on social media. Finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel and press that like button.